In this edition of the show, we'll talk with Florida Citizens Alliance president and co-founder Keith Flaugh about what's going on in both the state legislature and the state governor's office here in Florida and what it potentially means for you. All that up next on We Are the Watchmen Weekly Live. Stay tuned.
Hey everybody, I'm Andrew from EMP Shield, and today I'm excited to show you our new technology, the world's first whole home EMP protection device. With over 37 models that can be used around the world, our family of EMP protection devices installs easily in minutes. Being employed this year by federal organizations and electrical companies, the EMP Shield has been tested at Keystone Compliance, a federally approved DoD testing facility. Also serving as one of the world's fastest whole home surge protection devices, working in less than 1 nanosecond, the EMP Shield will protect against electromagnetic pulses, coronal mass ejections, lightning, and all forms of power surges. Proven to withstand more than 40 EMP strikes with zero degradation, the EMP Shield is also one of the world's strongest surge protectors, capable of withstanding over 100,000 amps.
And welcome back to We Are the Watchmen Weekly. This is R.C. Williams, and our special guest this week is the CEO and co-founder of Florida Citizens Alliance, Mr. Keith Flaugh. Keith, welcome to the show.
I'm very happy to be here, R.C. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you, Keith. Can you give us just a bit of background on Florida Citizens Alliance before we jump into the conversation we had a while back at the Believers Summit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Florida Citizens Alliance is a grassroots coalition of now over 300,000 people just here in Florida. We focus on K through 12 education. I often start a discussion by saying our public education are union-driven government monopolies, and our unions are Marxist. Ergo, what our kids are getting in school, even in the best of situations, is a Marxist or at least a socialist indoctrination. So we work in 3 pillars. We're very active in the legislative pillar, fighting for things like school choice without government subsidy. We are very active in trying to get rid of the indoctrination, the pornography, all of that sexual dysphoria that's in our public schools. And we also focus on the actual academics. One of the major things we've done for the last 7 years is an annual report that literally shows that 50% of our kids in Florida, and it varies a little bit by county, but not much, cannot read and do math at grade level. And you know, that sounds a little bit harsh compared to what people hear from legislators and politicians. I mean, I think we've all heard the governor say that we're number 1 in education. But what politicians won't tell you is that, in 2022-23, we ranked 37th on the ACT test.
Wow.
We ranked 43rd on the SAT test. And literally, back in 2022-23, 75% of our third graders are not reading at a level 4 or 5. So we've got a lot of work to do. I would argue that our public schools are not repairable. But we have to work to try to make them better on the competitive notion. You know, the hope is competition, all boats rise in a rising tide. And If we put enough pressure on the school districts by losing students to alternatives, the hope is they'll get better. I'm not sure we can ever make that elephant dance, but we can try.
Yeah. Keith, thank you for that background. And what you mentioned about the level of education and the governor saying, hey, we're number 1 in education, yet there's so many of our kids who can't even read at grade level. This is one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on. One, we wanted to make sure our audience was aware of the work that you're doing with Florida Citizens Alliance, but also a reminder of how difficult the situation actually is and that we need to get on our horse and fix it. So we were together recently at the Believers Summit from Turning Point USA Faith, and we were talking. You had made me aware of a couple of things that are happening right now legislatively, and I said, Keith, we've got to have you on to break down what's happening here and what people need to be on the lookout for. So I want to open the floor to you to go ahead and lay that all out for us.
Okay, well, there are three legal actions that I'll bring up, and it starts with what many people remember 2 years ago. It was parents' rights in education, but the left quickly labeled it the Don't Say Gay bill.
Right.
And I think most people will, because of all the national notoriety that got, I think people will recognize that. And what that bill was for K through 3. It was signed by the governor into law, and it prohibited the use of gender dysphoria and sexual indoctrination for K through 3. Then a year later, along came House Bill 1069, which enhanced that, and it expanded it on both ends. So it expanded it all the way down to pre-K and all the way up to 12th grade. And so what it was prohibiting was, this, and as it got expanded, it also, in the second bill, prohibited the use of pronouns. And it very clearly defined sex as immutably, I'm quoting, immutably tied to your chromosomes. So those were the two bills. There were some other bills around that were focused on getting the stuff out of the libraries, and requiring training for media center managers, et cetera. But, it was really the culmination of probably 5 or 6 years worth of work by a lot of us, our team included, to really get our arms around what was going on in public schools with this sexually explicit material. So then fast forward a little bit, back in, I guess it would have been probably 6 or 7 months ago, the Florida Department of Education, let me start at a different place. The Equality Florida filed a lawsuit against the Department of Education for that first bill, that what they call the Don't Say Gay bill. And they filed that complaint based on discrimination. The first court that heard it, the First Circuit Court, threw the case out because they concluded that the Equality Florida didn't have standing. So then Equality Florida went back and fiddled with their standing and came back a second time, and the court threw them out a second time for not having standing. The Equality Florida then appealed the case to the appellate court, and between the time of that being thrown out a second time and the appellate court making a decision, by the way, the only decision that was before them was whether Equality Florida had standing or not. The Department of Education entered into a settlement with the Equality Florida, which completely undermines everything that was in the original bill, in our opinion. It very, very narrowly defines what classroom instruction is, and RC, it just literally put everything back that we would, and made it explicitly okay for gender pronouns, for rainbow flags in the classroom, for kids cross-dressing, school dances. While it technically, and the governor and the DOE are arguing that it very narrowly protects the bill because the law still exists, I would argue that it's been, pardon the expression, neutered so much that it's almost irrelevant. We have 3 lawyers, one of which is a civil rights attorney, who's evaluated that, and they all tell us that it just provides a roadmap for every rogue teacher or district to do exactly what they were doing before. So it's frustrating. Sometimes I get asked how things are going, and I use the banana peel expression, 1 step forward and 2 back. This, in our opinion, was definitely a couple of steps back. Now, I said there were 3 legal actions, so let me get to the second one. We've been fighting in Collier County and multiple counties and 1069 that I just referenced went a long way towards requiring school districts to take pornographic books out of the school.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the counties have ignored that, and in fact, almost all of them have ignored it. But Collier County, which is my county, after 6 years, last October, we got them to remove 313 books out of the public school libraries. Indian River County, we had to sue them, but they removed about 250 books. But most of the other counties are not removing them. The office under the US Department of Education is the Office of Civil Rights. And they filed what's called an Office of Civil Rights complaint against 2 counties across the US, one of which is Collier County, my county, and the other is Forsyth County, Georgia. And the basis for their complaint is challenging discrimination under Article 6 and Article 9 of federal statute. So that's still pending. But interestingly enough, in that it's a 31-page complaint. And interesting enough, they actually cite the settlement, the first settlement that I told you about that the DOE entered into. So now this is snowballing, if you will, right? We had a good bill, in our opinion, a good law. It got watered down by the Department of Education for reasons we don't understand why they did. I mean, the court didn't dictate them to do that. They just decided to do it. And then you've got the Office of Civil Rights complaint. So now let me go to the third one. You've heard me mention House Bill 1069, which was the second bill that followed on to the first bill. Several months ago, I think it's been about 4 months now, several parents here in Florida filed in federal court a lawsuit against 1069. They're coming at 1069 from a fairly narrow perspective. Part of House Bill 1069 said that if it provided a process by which parents in a district who were objecting to books in the library, and they could go through a process and object, and if the school district decided to keep the book despite the parent's complaint, then the parent could appeal to Commissioner of Education Diaz. And he had 30 days to establish a magistrate to assess and make a recommendation about whether the book violated Florida's obscenity statutes or not. So that was what was put into House Bill 1069, among other things. There were some very strong language in there on getting rid of pronouns. It very clearly, 1069 said that your sex is immutably tied to your chromosomes. And so a lot of good stuff in 1069. So this third lawsuit challenges 1069 from kind of an interesting perspective. It gives parents the right to go to a magistrate to get books out, but it doesn't give parents who want to keep the books the right to go to a magistrate to keep them in. And so they're claiming discrimination. And so that's a federal lawsuit that's working its way through the courts. It's frustrating in a lot of respects because we've worked so hard to try to clean up our public schools from this sexually explicit material. And I'm going to go back to something I said right at the beginning, and then I'll stop and we can take questions or whatever. Sure. These public schools are not repairable. They're built on a socialist model at best. I would call it a secular model, socialist model that's rapidly approaching communism, Marxist, and so they're not fixable. We work at the legislature to try to put competition there, but at the end of the day, there really is only one solution if we're going to save this constitutional republic, and that's privatize all education without government subsidy. Parents need to take control of their education. We have a new initiative called Micro School, helping Christian moms and dads start micro schools. Gee, how great would it be if you as a parent could actually implant and disciple your values into your kid, rather than having the government schools disciple socialism or Marxism into your child. So we've got a lot of work to do. That's a quick overview of the three bills that we talked about, RC. So let me stop there and take questions, or go wherever you want.
Keith, I am floored here, and I'd like to get your take on why the DOE, when it appeared by all accounts that the case had no standing and that the appellate court may have gone in the same direction, why would the DOE move to settle a case that to me feels like doesn't need settling?
I wish I knew the answer to that. That I could speculate with you on what happened. One thing I will tell you is with absolute certainty, the DOE, the Commissioner of Education, serves at the pleasure of the governor. And so they didn't do this in a vacuum. They did this with the governor's support. We did have a meeting 3 weeks ago now with the chief counsel for Governor DeSantis. He was not, he defended what they did. He didn't tell us particularly why. He just defended what they did. And we showed him the Office of Civil Rights complaint, and he had no idea that existed. In fact, took a strong view that they shouldn't be using the settlement. So, frankly, what I'd like to see, and I don't think there's much of a chance of this, but I would like to see both chambers in the next legislative cycle reestablish their authority. They both passed House Bill, the original Parents' Rights and Education Bill, and they have every right to come back and override what the DOE did with the governor's blessing. Whether they will do that or not is remains to be seen. I'm based on how things are going these days, I'm not sure I'd put a lot of stock in that. I will tell you, RC, that two of the things that we're working on that we think become even more important, we've been working on them for multiple years. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to get too technical with you, but in Florida, we have an obscenity for minors bill. And it's a third-degree felony to have any of this sexual explicit pornographic material in the school districts. But nobody will actually hold teachers, administrators accountable. We've had numerous discussions with some great sheriffs, Sheriff Grady Judd, for example, my Sheriff Rambas. We've had detailed discussions with him. And the reason they won't hold a criminal complaint against a school teacher or administrator goes back to a Supreme Court decision in 1979 that was called the Miller Test versus California. And some of us that are old enough may remember, and I don't remember which Supreme Court justice said it. I looked it up at one point, but I've forgotten. I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. Some of us have heard that saying, right? Yeah. Well, that was the Supreme Court justice at the time this Miller Test was created. The Miller Test right now has 3 parts to it, and the third part, Part C, is the real challenge. What it says, and I'm paraphrasing, but what it says is that any material, when taken as a whole, if it has any literary value, then even if it's pornographic, it's protected under the Free Speech First Amendment. That did not differentiate, that Miller Test did not differentiate between parents and kids. And so 30-some states, including Florida, picked that Miller Test up and put it in our obscenity for minors bill. It has no business being there.
Wow.
We work with an organization that I hope you run across, Citizens Defending Freedom, Steve Maxwell's organization.
Yes.
Their chief counsel did an amazing study for us last fall on the whole Miller test. And it turns out there are 3 other Supreme Court decisions, one before Miller and 2 after, that actually encourage the states to create different standards for their kids versus their adults. So we have a Supreme Court precedent of 3 around Miller. And so we're going to be working really hard in this next legislative cycle to get the Miller test modified to protect kids differently from minors. We have a sponsor in the House or in the Senate as Stan McLean moves over from the House to the Senate. He's assured us he'll run that bill. If not, Senator Grahl was going to run it last year. Last year, we had the support of the governor's office to get that passed, and we just got caught up in some politics in the House that had nothing to do with the bill, and so we lost it last year. So it becomes really important, particularly now that we have these 3 legal cases in play, to go right at the heart of the content. If we can get this Miller test modified, then it'll settle the content issue across the board, in our opinion. So that's maybe a long-winded way of saying we haven't given up. That's the approach we're going to take.
So, Keith, it's good to see that level of detail, though, and the fact that there is precedent from the Supreme Court out there. I don't think that we can continue to let the enemy narrowcast, because that's what they do well. They'll hyper-focus on something and leave out the other parts that don't work in their favor, and they've become exceedingly good at it. One of the concerns that we've had, and our sister publication, Ripped from the Headlines, has actually done a series on this called Florida's Strange Fruit, and in it we actually looked at SB 7050, which allowed DeSantis to remain governor and run for president, but at the same time, it also had language in to try and kill voter integrity. And now we're getting word that someone who may run for governor in 2026 is actually actively working to kill sound money legislation, which we were in Tallahassee last session together. We were working on the Sound Money Act bill to make gold and silver legal tender in the state of Florida. We're now getting word that someone who may run for governor is actively trying to kill that bill in the study phase. And for us, it's more of this Florida strange fruit, what's actually happening in Tallahassee. And what you're sharing with us, Keith, I think is another part of what's a bigger problem. And people think, well, we've got a Republican governor and we've got Republican supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. What can go wrong? Well, the reality is that a lot can go wrong if you're not vigilant. And I applaud you guys for staying on top of this and not letting it go. Keith, before we wrap up, I'd like to make sure people know how to contact you, information that's available, how they can support you in your efforts, because you're a 501c3. Please let us know how people can reach you and support you and all of that stuff.
I'd be happy to. Our website is goflca.org, goflca.org. My information is public knowledge out there, but I'm not hesitant to give people my cell phone, 239-250-3320. We are working really hard to implement this micro school initiative. We are looking for, we call them ambassadors, but we're training consultants to come alongside Christian moms and dads, and anybody that has an appetite for saving kids and paying it forward, so to speak. We would love to have the conversation with you. So that's goflca.org. We have a great team, a small team, but it does take money to do what we do. And yes. So we always welcome the donations.
Keith, we really appreciate you being with us. Thanks for being on. For Keith Flaugh, this is R.C. Williams with We Are the Watchmen Weekly. You can find more information and episodes of the show at wearethewatchmen.org. That's wearethewatchmen.org. florida.org. Until next time, so long.